It's only when you get back home that you can really begin to understand a trip and implement the changes it may have set into motion inside you. A journey really transforms you only after the physical movement is over and the emotional and moral and spiritual implications start to settle inside you and make you something new. As with the journey itself, it's up to you to keep traveling and thinking long after you're back in the life you know well. So, 2 days after you return from somewhere, consciously ask yourself 3 essential questions. First, what moved you most over the course of your trip? Second, what surprised you most? And third, how might your journey move you to think or live a little differently? 2 months later, once you're probably back in your regular routine, ask yourself the same questions. I'm pretty sure you'll come up with very different answers as memory begins to sift and more essential moments start to reverberate inside you. For me, it's nearly always the differences in other cultures that ultimately toll most deeply inside. Not the moments that bring back to us all that we share, warming though they may be. I'm changed by those moments I can't explain, those questions I can't begin to answer. How and why do we live in a world where in Manila I see trim, well-spoken, well-educated little girls comb their hair and then go to sleep on the central divider of a busy main street? Probably grateful that they're not living as their cousins do in the Smoky Mountain garbage dump. What must it be like to be living in Haiti, where, when I was there, the majority of adults had to work outside the official economy, and 60% of the people over the age of 25 had enjoyed little or no formal schooling? How much can a North Korean even imagine a world like the one we occupy? And does that maybe allow someone in Pyongyang to live in relative peace, even in a situation that for the rest of us might be almost unthinkable? I've sometimes thought about this as a pebble in the shoe, the thing you just can't get out of your head or imagination. And for me, that's often much more precious than the painting I buy or the photos I bring home, partly because it's gone so much deeper into my being. I never forget visiting the temples of Angkor in Cambodia one New Year's Day. I looked up and I saw 2 of the leaders of the Khmer Rouge, the regime that had murdered 1.7 million people, 1 in every 4 Cambodians, coming to enjoy some sightseeing on this bright and warm holiday morning. "We need to kill them," said someone standing right next to me, his knuckles turning white on the pillars of a temple. "They killed my mother. They killed my father. They killed everybody I know." But somebody else was standing there and said, no, we can't afford to continue the endless cycle of violence. We need to practice forgiveness. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. "No," cried a third voice. "How can we ever believe in anything if we can't believe in justice?" It wasn't my place to say a word, but it highlighted for me the kind of question that arises in different forms in my life again and again. Travel rarely gives me answers. Instead, it offers something much more urgent. Questions that make me rethink everything I thought I knew. 6 months later, I took my wife to see the country that had moved me so deeply. We were shown around by a truly charming, intelligent, very gentle young Cambodian who was working hard and with great resourcefulness to try to create a new future in the rubble of his country's devastation. At one point, my wife asked him what he would do if somebody stole something from him. He turned around and flashed a very sweet smile. "Of course," he said, "I'd kill him." That moment probably stayed with her at least as much as all the ravishing temples that we saw. And it asked us if we were any different. If we had been living in that society, how would we act? What were the assumptions that we held that would shock our gentle new friend? "If you kill the Khmer Rouge murderers," he'd said, "you have to kill everybody. Which of us is truly innocent?" In the beginning of 2020, just as the pandemic was descending, I found myself sailing around the Antarctic Peninsula. The vast silences, the colonies of penguins in the snow, the thousand shades of silver, they were all beyond anything I'd seen or even imagined. 87% of the glaciers there are receding. The temperature, just a few weeks after we left, hit 64.9 degrees, as it had never done before. 2/3 of the water on our entire planet is on that southern continent. I knew that I was in danger of worsening our environment just by going there. In recent decades, significant steps have been taken to protect that environment. Only smaller ships are permitted to take visitors ashore, and the number of people on shore at any time is very strictly limited. You have to step into disinfectant every time you go on shore and come back, but still, we're damaging the environment just by flying down there. So what can we bring back to possibly justify that damage? How much can the strengthened sense of responsibility that arises from witnessing that grandeur offset the cost of travelling around it? How will we live differently in the light of what we saw there? On a much more practical level, when you start to share stories and memories from your trip, which are you going to stress? How are you going to make the trip richer and more lasting than just the time spent on the ground in a very different place? How are you going to keep up with the people that you met and honor your promises to Maria in Manila or Dinor in Addis Ababa? Now that you've gained so much, perhaps even been transformed, what are you going to give back? For me, writing is a small way to make concrete what I've learnt and to put down in print how I might want to change my life. And of course, many of you are going to do the same with photographs, with artwork, with stories that you tell your friends. But I think you have to devote conscious time to making real the dawning changes inside you after you get home. Promise yourself maybe 20 minutes every day to ensure that the journey doesn't get lost or shoved inside a closet. Ask yourself how your life is rich in ways you hadn't imagined before. Ask yourself how it's poor. How might you act differently now? How might what you witnessed in the Antarctic Peninsula move you to take practical measures about your protection of our shared home? The first question we have to ask before undertaking any trip is whether the person at the other end in Boise or Bhutan would rather see us or not. And in my experience, she nearly always would vote for our presence, if only so she can learn about our world even as we are learning about hers. But maybe the last question to ask after you return home is how you can turn what sometimes began as a holiday into a life-changing experience. How can you live better for seeing the world than when it was just a set of images on screen or ideas, maybe daydreams in your head? It's after we get home, as Thoreau said, that we really go over the mountain.